Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Revenue Through Reputation. I'm Brandon Lee, and I get to be the host. And hey, we're going to talk about something today that I think is really relevant for everybody. We're gonna talk about AI, and I know everybody's talking about AI, but we're going to take a different perspective. I've got my guest is Denise Bachmann, who's a founder of Celevators. And Denise had been a guest with me on my other show, Mastering Modern Selling. And we have become, friends over the last couple of months and been talking a lot about AI and how we can't fake trust and how your audience feels it. So there you are already. Look at that. Denise, welcome to Revenue Through Reputation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. And I do think that this topic's relevant to revenue through reputation because our reputation is us, right? We as humans.
Yeah, and so let me just get a couple of housekeeping things done before we start, Denise, and then we'll let you tell everybody about you. And my show is sponsored by Fist Bump. It happens to also be my company. If you're a C-suite or sales leader and you are struggling with creating content in order to build your reputation to create more opportunities, we may be a solution for you. From some entry level services to more robust services. If that's a struggle you're having, we would be excited to have a conversation and help you. I would be excited to have a conversation and see if we can help you. Other than that, if you are watching live and you comment, we will see it, and we're open to your questions and your comments. And I'll put Denise on the hot seat to answer your questions. And if you're on the podcast, hey, you may know me from my other shows. This is a brand new show. This is episode 3. So if you're on the podcast, I'd be really grateful if you like what you hear. Give me a review, share it with anybody that you know. That would be excellent. Thank you so much. Now, Denise, tell everybody a little bit about you, and then let's jump into this because, AI is AI. It's like everything that we've really been talking about for the past 18 months or so now. And now, 18 months into it, we're starting to see some of the downsides to AI content, especially because trust is such an important thing. So tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, so maybe less about me, but more about why AI is such a passionate discussion for me or topic. And it's really because and you'll get to know me through a little bit of that, which is I spent over 30 years in sales. And the latter part of that was spent in AI, machine learning, and automation space. And what I learned was the reason why I left corporate to start my own business was that we were trying to adopt a lot of these AI technologies and inject them into the sales process. And what I was experiencing both as a sales rep in an organization attempting to do that, and also as a consumer, a recipient of some of those new technologies, was that we were automating and introducing AI in so many different ways that we were losing the human aspect of the sales process, but within that sales process. And so I realized there was a gap that I could fulfill. And where I thrived, my zone of genius is bringing that human back into building and fostering that human connection, building long-term relationships and partnerships that win. And so I realized that we needed to get back to, and that's where I could fulfill the gap. So, or fill, not fulfill, but fill the gap.
Yeah, it is, and so for everybody, like Denise and I talk a couple times a week, and we've been partnering on some things. So this is what I like about this show concept is people just get to be flies on the wall listening to our conversation and our conversations that we've had about this. And you came at it from the background that you just said, that in the corporate world you were losing that human touch, and you were seeing that it affected the trust. And then my background, I started using content for leaders in 1998. I had no idea what I was doing. We didn't even
That
have
was like well before we even generated content back then.
yeah, we didn't use the word content, but we were creating content right? I was creating personalized magazines that were branded for leaders, sending them out to large networks of people. But it always came down to the same thing. And it was, we have to lead with our humanity, because if you lead with a logo, people don't care as much. And I think that's the whole foundation of what you talk about. It's a foundation of what I talk about. It's a foundation, I think, of what we're going to talk about today when we say AI can't fake trust. AI can't fake, I mean, it tries to fake humanity. But if our audience is feeling at all like, oh, this is just AI, this is just stuff they flash out to anybody and everybody, they're pretty quick to just shut down and move on.
They are. And I think too, there are people who attempt to sell nowadays because we have such automated processes and because we have so many workflow solutions and new technologies that we're leveraging. It's almost as if we as humans have forgotten how to engage. And so even when we engage in a way that seems very robotic, it shuts people down right away. So whether you're using technology or you just haven't learned how to differentiate yourself from technology, it shuts down that prospect, that potential client, that new found friend right away, because they realize that you aren't coming from the heart. You're not being
Mhm.
your yourself. You are just modeling what you think should be accomplished and appropriate because we have these poor examples that we're leveraging today.
Oh my gosh, Denise. Okay, so people listening, what Denise just said is so important. You said people are implementing, I think you used a different word, but you're implementing systems that have been modeled for them that they think they're supposed to do, and then they do it at scale, and then they wonder why it doesn't work.
Yes.
I was with a CEO yesterday, had a phenomenal lunch, by the way, like,
Ooh.
you know, chicken on a spit on a skewer with beans and rice and tortillas,
Mm.
phenomenal. Um, but one of the things he was saying is that he did this several years ago, brought in somebody, they systematized, they automated, da 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 da, and in a year they were out however many hundreds of thousands of dollars and had nothing to show for it. And the conversation led to, hey, you know what? What if we targeted 100 people, 100 prospects this year, and just did a super personalized program for each individual person?
Yeah, I call that Uber personalization.
Yeah.
And it
And
only really takes what people are when you start to embark on that conversation, before you even really finish the conversation or get to a point where you help them understand what that really means, they're already thinking in their head, "Oh my gosh, that's going to take so much time," right? But it doesn't really take that much more time. It only takes a few extra minutes, maybe not even minutes, but even maybe just seconds, for you to just look at their profile a bit more and understand what heck, if you can't even be take the time to do that, you can go on Chat GPT and say, "Hey, I need this person. Here's his LinkedIn profile. Find him anywhere else that you can find him. You are a detective who wants to come, wants to get as much information possible as it relates to business, because here's what I want to accomplish." And then boom, there you go. You have it all in front of you.
right. That is so good. So, Jason, I want to back this up a little bit,
Okay.
because that was very practical, tactical, and I know my audience usually loves it. I want to deep dive that in a second. But can you share with why humanizing your brand is no longer optional?
Yeah, I think it's because, look, we've got a ton of people out there making noise that say they can do all of these things. The differentiator now, because you've got so much noise, the differentiator is going to be we as humans. I mean, look, pre pandemic, and I know we're 5 years, well, depending on when we think the pandemic actually ended, right? We know it started about 5 years ago. So we're pretty deep into being at least on the other side of that. But the reality is this: before the pandemic, people were going 90 to nothing, and they were going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and they didn't have any time to sit in front of their desk. And so you as the individual had to educate them. Well, they don't really need to be educated anymore, because now they're isolated, they're sequestered to their laptop. Yes, they may be going from meeting to meeting, but they're doing it from their laptop, so they can still stream, they can still go and scroll the internet and get all the information that they need. So now they're not looking for you to educate them any longer. They're looking for you to create and foster this experience. And that experience can only come through humanization. It is no longer about, yes, now Nike we know is just do it. But if you think about even pre-pandemic with Nike, their commercials were always about runners who were making a difference, right? It was fostering that emotion and that connection. That is what we have to do now today to differentiate ourselves from those that don't. And quite honestly, there are more that do that there are more that actually don't focus on the human connection than there are those that do. And those that do are going to be the ones that win.
Yeah. So, Denise, I've got this challenge, as you know. I mean, revenue through reputation. We're in episode 3, and thank you for coming on so early with me. But, mastering modern selling, we're in episode, I think, 134. I've been doing that about 3 years. And here's the thing that I keep hearing: personalization, being personal, being human, taking time to do the research to speak directly to them, not use these workflows, not use mass everything. Those are the people that win. And yet, if I look up, most of what I see is email automation, workflow automation, mass messaging at scale. Where's the rub? What's happening here? Why is automation and mass messaging at scale still so prominent?
Well, because look, I mean, the name of the game when you're branding, when you're selling, is about credibility and visibility. So I always, even with clients that I have today, I am not a firm believer on leveraging cold calls or cold emails, because I don't like to be the recipient of those. So if I don't want to be a recipient of them, I don't want anyone else. I don't want to tell anyone else to do that. But however, what I will say this is, as part of visibility, when I look through my emails, I never open up ones that I don't know who they are, or even if I know who they are, if I know what kind of email they are, like they're selling me something, right? I usually never open those. But what I will say is, if for some reason Sarah, we'll just use that name, if she's been sending me a bunch of emails through a workflow process that's selling me something, I'm not going to look at them, but I'll remember that she sent me a million of them. So when she actually sends me a personalized one, right, then I am more apt to open that because I've seen the visibility. Or if she connects with me on LinkedIn, now don't ask me what she was trying to sell me. I'll just remember her name. So I do say that it does work from a visibility perspective. Do I believe in them? No. Do I think that those types of emails generate anything? No. But they do generate a little bit of visibility. And so that if you decide to reach out to them. So I do think that they can, when you know that and you leverage them in that way, and then mix that in with more personalized engagement versus non-personalized, I think you'll see some amazing results. That being said, I'm okay if you just get away from those altogether, but I will say that they do create some visibility.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with that. And that's kind of I think that's the strategy we've taken on at Fist Bump, is that we do have email campaigns that go out. It's very educational in nature, and the goal is build reputation. We know that not a lot of them are going to be read. We know that there's not a lot of them. We get clicks and things, but I don't have high expectations from it, because it is what it is. But I do know that because of the show and because of that type of reputation, a lot of times when I do send out connection requests, or I do make a call or send an email, I can get more people to go, "Oh yeah, I feel like I know you." So it
Exactly.
is what kind of a 1-2 punch.
Now, that being said, it can go the opposite direction, which is why I just choose not to leverage those and choose to create visibility in other methods, right? Which for me is generating content, getting on guesting on lives like this, right? So I choose to do my visibility differently, because the other extreme is that people can be so annoyed that when you engage with them, even personalized, that they'll just, but that I will say is the fewer, right? Most of them don't know that they're annoyed necessarily by your emails. They'll just remember that they had a million. Because look, people don't have time to be annoyed because they see a million of those generic emails coming through all the time. They'll just remember the name, and they'll know that they know you from somewhere.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's talk about. We had a topic we were going to talk about here is fake voices versus real presence. What do you mean by that, and what should people be concerned about?
Yeah, so voices can be described in two different ways. Voices are like the deep fakes and the overriding of your actual voice. And then the voice is also just even your written content, like your brand voice, who you are as Denise Murtha Buchmann, right? So regardless of which platform or which medium we're talking about, right? It is, the difference is one that is AI generated, that is more fake, is also not going to have the emotion, the energy, the connection. I can look at Brandon and I can see. I mean, not that you are right now, but I could see if you were annoyed, so I could adjust what I'm saying or how I'm moving or engaging with you, right? Like that, right there, like that, right? Uh, I could adjust, but when we're talking like video or live, so leveraging a deep fake then becomes a bit different, which, by the way, deep fake has gotten really smart, right? They can adjust to what you're saying and how you're engaging, but they can't really take on the emotional aspect and the things that we need to do as individuals. And when you're talking about content, there is always, I can, because I spend a lot of time in AI and automation, I can tell when it's AI generated content.
Mhm.
And there are a multitude of ways that you can determine that, right? And I will say that sometimes I think it's automated and it may not be, but for the most part, you can tell when it's automated by the words that it uses, by the number of emojis that it uses, how it hyphenates a bunch of different words, right? That really should never be hyphenated. But ultimately, regardless of the medium that you're leveraging, what I always talk about is when you leverage technologies to be your voice, whether through content or these, video, you represent yourself that is not really who you are. So when you get on the phone with someone actually for the first time live, there's a huge disconnect between
Mhm.
what they read and saw versus how you're engaging with them, because it never is the exact same. And then they wonder, well, who is this person? And I had a friend like that where I really thought that she was completely different because what she was generating in her texts seemed very chat GPT-ish. And then when you talk with her, it was completely different.
Mm.
And I learned that that's what she was actually doing, leveraging chat GPT, right? But that was because I knew the technologies well enough to distinguish. Most people don't. All they see is when they get on the phone with someone and talking to them live, they see that something doesn't match. And that's
And
the
you
thing we need to get away from.
matters.
It does matter.
How's that?
Did you say our voice matters? Is that what you said?
No, I said, how's that? Like, I mean, look, you know me, I'm playing dumb. Does that
Yes,
matter?
yes, yes.
Of course, right. How does it matter? I mean, I guess for people out there listening and paying attention to this content, like, so if your voice is one way in content, especially written content, and then somebody gets on the phone and you're different, is that going to jeopardize your opportunity to be successful?
Hell yeah, because people want to know that who they're engaging with in the content is who they're going to engage with live, and vice versa, right? What they then realize is, yes, we all know that in the back end everyone's leveraging some sort of technology, but they want to know that who they see in their content is who they're getting live, and who they're getting live is who they're going to see in the content. When that doesn't match up, it leaves them wondering who the real person is. It's a huge trust issue. We go back to AI can't fake trust, right? It goes back to a trust issue. They want to know that you care enough about them. Even when that content is for a million people, they want to know that that content speaks to them. So when it is not you generating that content, they're like, that doesn't seem quite right. Why do I want to engage with them going forward, right?
Yeah.
It does
You know,
matter.
I think it's what's interesting, Denise, is that number one, I agree with you. I mean, I think humanity wins. And I will stand by that statement. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to say, no, AI is going to overcome it and humanity won't really matter. But I'm a big believer that humanity wins. Um, there's a lot of people out there that the I guess the shiny light syndrome of we can put all this stuff into GPT, we can get all this content with workflow automation and email campaigns. We're going to go out and get in front of 50,000 people and just play the numbers game. What do you say to that?
I'd ask when someone says that they believe in the numbers game, I'd ask them what those results, what the success rate is. What do those results really generate? I mean, think about cold calling. Let's just talk about cold calling, which is us as humans picking up the phone. A successful cold call, the success rate with cold calling is only 1 to 2%. Someone
Right.
who's good may get upwards to 6%, but think about that means you have to make 100 dials to get one or two. And by the way, those aren't conversion rates to true opportunities. Those are
That's
just
conversation.
exactly. And
Yeah.
then you got to figure, and then obviously, if you're only getting one or two out of 100 dials, that means that the success rate to conversion is even less than that, right? So I think that, those that play the numbers game hide behind the numbers rather than actually taking the time. And I always say you got to slow down to speed up. The more you can personalize, the more you can just be yourself. Now, look, that does not mean you shouldn't leverage technology. I leverage Chat GPT. I will sometimes say, okay, here's my persona. I want you to be the CRO who's navigating both sales and marketing. I need a message, and I'll give it a full list. If you don't know, if you can't generate the output yet because you have some questions, ask me what those questions are. And and so I will take it down a road. Now I will take what it shares with me, I'll ponder it, I'll adjust it, I'll make it in my voice. Maybe it doesn't need to be my voice, but you get my point, right? Which is, you just take it as a guide. When you leverage automation for email campaigns, remember, if you're just using it for visibility, it's perfect, right? But you still have to find ways to inject the human into that, which is sorry, we were frozen there for a second. You got to find ways to inject the human in that. So send a personalized email, send a personalized DM, pick up the phone and call them directly, right? Those are all things that you can do to personalize. So again, leverage technology. It's going to make us more efficient. And the reality is, if you aren't leveraging technology in some form or another, you will be left behind. But do it smartly and still remember that the human is the most valuable part of the technology.
Yeah. Yeah, what you were saying there reminds me, especially specifically around the call, is that I spoke with a sales leader. They did the data and they had like a 99% close loss rate on their BDRs on the calls. They were still experiencing like a 30, 33, 34, 35%, somewhere in there. I can remember. I remember saying it was about a third conversion rate with their account executives, but their BDRs had a 99% loss rate. So they let go of everybody and they thought, well, let's go outsource it to the experts. And they outsourced it to a company for like 9 months and however many hundreds of thousands of dollars they spent, and they had nothing to show for it. So then they thought, well, we just need to get somebody to come in and hire our own people and really train them the right way. So they hired somebody, they brought him in, and they were like 6 months into it without success. And the person they hired said, oh, you know what? We just got the wrong people. Let's do it again and train people better. And then they went a second round of training people and implementing them, and they still had zero. And this is when the sales leader finally said, it's time for me to leave this company because it was C-suite and board decision to keep trying to figure out how to make cold calling work. And they just spent, millions of dollars and never really got anywhere. And I say that because I believe there's a big fear to doing things differently, right? How do you speak to that? Because I mean, I'm like everyone else. Like my most successful company, we turned on a call center and we started pounding phone calls, and we went from 0 to 18 million in 5 years, and it was hugely successful. But I also launched that in the early aughts, and I sold it in 2010. It was just a completely different world. But I would love to be able to just pick up, create a call center again and start making calls and have success. The reality is it's just not going to work.
Mm-mm. Well, I mean, I say this: fear is what holds us back. So you can continue to do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And that's insanity, right? So you've got insanity and fear that prevents you from being successful. Look, the people who can break through that fear, and instead of worrying about if they're not doing it, actually taking on and starting new action. And if you truly are fearful of it, then start a little group. It doesn't have to be the entire sales team, right? Start a little focus group that's focused on selling in the new modern way. I mean, Brandon's got a whole nother show, Mastering Modern Selling, right? Start adopting some new modern strategies and see the results. Take some time to just hire a handful of people that can do that and really focus on the results that they're generating. Look at the activity that they're doing and how far along they're coming versus the ones who are doing the cold calls. What you will find 100% is a higher success rate in adopting the new strategies today and the way we sell today rather than the old way. So if you're fearful, you're going to hold yourself back. And if you are that fearful and you just want to at least try it, then just try a little focus group. And if you don't want to try anything and you stay in that fear, you will be obsolete at some point or another. 100%.
Where do you think, like, you talk to business leaders and sales leaders all the time about this, like, what is so let's say there's a leader out there listening to this and they've been in that stuck, like, hey, I just want to go back and do it the way we've done it and have it work, and we know that's not likely, but God bless them. How do you have that conversation with them? How do you move them over into maybe trying a small little beta test with one or two people?
Yeah, well, you do have to be. I think one of the things we are fearful as humans today is we're afraid of challenging someone or afraid of being honest or afraid of being direct, right? I don't know why that there are very few of us, or there are fewer of us who are willing to challenge. And look, the way you have that conversation, sometimes I win it and sometimes I don't, but here are the stats: less than 2% success rate in the cold calls. I take them back to the 100 dials a day. I take them to my success rate, right? I share success rates with some of my clients and I help them see that there's a better way of doing it. And look, you may not want to believe me, so let's just try a beta. You pay me less. I'll make the money on the commissions, right? I'll do a revenue share with you. You pay me less, and I will make the revenue share because we're going to hit those sales numbers doing it my way. And so
Yeah.
you just start to develop, just a little pilot program, a beta program, whatever you want to call it. It's focus group. Get a few people in there, put a process together, some KPIs that you want to meet, and boom. I mean, what you'll find is you'll see tremendous success on the new way versus the old way. So I do have to challenge them. And if they don't, and there are some that just are fearful, that respond negatively, and you just got to let them go. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. But
Yeah.
those that you can challenge and move them over and get them and move them over by giving them facts and metrics that can relate to them, that they can understand it. Someone's out there doing it and they are seeing success. Just to say it is one thing, but to be able to prove it with metrics and statistics is another thing.
So, so along the lines, Denise, we're talking about AI can't fake trust, and your audience knows it. There's also, we can't fake executive presence. It's either your C-suite is, as we say, showing up, creating content, being visible, or they're not. Can you speak to how executive presence helps grow the company value or the company brand?
Sure. I mean, look, it's again about credibility and visibility. So when you have all of your team engaging out there and generating content, then of course you're going to get visibility, and they are more slowly going to create credibility. Credibility comes from your C-suite executives. When they get out there and are visible, and then they can include their credibility, it skyrockets all the effort that everyone is doing together and enables them to bring in opportunities by having more conversation, because people again want to know, like, and trust with credibility. Actually, I said again, but I hadn't stated that at all in this session, in this episode. But people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust with credibility. So when you bring an executive in on board who can help message and have and foster these conversations in the social media content, it establishes this credibility that just a sales rep can't do. I mean, they will do eventually, but it takes them longer because they're a sales rep. A CEO has that title, that designation that immediately establishes credibility, and then you can foster that credibility through your content. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. And I think I've had enough conversations with leaders that kind of say very similar things, and then they kind of shake their head and they move on and they never engage it. What's going on there, do you think?
Oh, I'm sure there's fear, right? Because the people, like when you think about salespeople, and I'm only referencing salespeople because that's who I engage with regularly. It can be a marketing team, it can be a scientific team, it can be an accounting team. It doesn't really matter. Just an individual. When you think about a group of individuals who are out there generating content, when they're not an executive, they have less to lose, right? In their mind, they're just generating content because they're just an average Joe human, right? Which is not really the case. We're all the same value and worth. But in terms of their role, they think, well, it doesn't matter what my content is like. Yes, I do want to reach my ideal client. I do want to attract business, but they don't feel as though they have as much pressure or as far to fall should they do something wrong. If you think about an executive, they tend to have fear that they might say the wrong thing. They might misrepresent. They might present themselves in a light that they don't want to be seen. If you think about individuals who go to work every day, they tend to have their work persona and then their personal persona, and they're afraid to bring the two together, right? They're afraid that if they allow someone to see their vulnerable side, and when you put yourself in a position where you're generating content, whether that's through text or through visuals like this, you put yourself in a position to potentially allow the two to merge, and that can be fearful.
Yeah. I like to ask questions when I'm talking to C-suite around that is when you're in sales leaders, right? C-suite sales leaders, when you're at dinner, let's pretend you're at a dinner and you got like two prospects, two clients, and one colleague, and you're at a dinner. What do you talk about?
Well, I like to get to know a little bit about them and what they're doing within their business. I always make it always about them and less about me. And so it's really about uncovering, and I eventually get them to a point where we're talking about problems that I can potentially solve for them, but in a way that they're fostering that conversation, right? And then I'm just gathering intel and information. When they all have the opportunity to make it about them, they're more willing to engage because, look, we as humans, we like to talk about ourselves. We feel the most comfortable when we talk about ourselves. So if you can get them talking about themselves, what you'll uncover is, one, you'll get to know them and understand their problems in a way you hadn't before. The other is that they start to foster these relationships amongst one another as well, right? Which then they'll remember, because when you think about the things that we think about as humans, we tend to think about more often the negative things in our lives. But what we will think more positively about are the experiences that we had.
Yeah.
And when you've got an amazing experience where you're having amazing conversation, they will remember that. They may not remember all of the conversation, but they'll remember the experience that they had.
Remember how they felt.
Mhm.
So let me ask it this different way.
Okay.
What percent of that conversation is business, and what percent at that hypothetical dinner is more humanity, personal?
Well, if you're doing a dinner, more of it should be humanity and personal because you're taking them outside. The goal when you are doing a dinner like that is that you're trying to get to know them a bit more, right? People want to do business again with people they know, like, and trust. Now I can say again and actually mean it, but they know, like, and trust with credibility. And when you get to know them in a way that, for example, I'll use a perfect one. I had a friend who, I say a friend because he is a friend now, but at the time it was just a work relationship. And his wife went through she gave birth and their baby was not doing well. And so we did a meal train and I went and saw them because she was born really premature and I had experienced a 3-month premature baby myself. So I could relate. Now, this is a different, and not everyone can relate to everything that all the stories or situations that you hear from your clients or prospects, but the idea is to find something that you can relate to in some form or another. And it was easy for me to relate to that because I'd experienced it, and so I was able to share my experiences, help make them feel a bit better because I really cared. And when I did that, we became friends for life and business partners. We were able to close business and accomplish things that we hadn't in the past because I showed my human side. I showed that I really cared about them. And knowing those things, uncovering those things only happen when you have engagements like a dinner.
Yeah.
So when you take them out to dinner, you want to spend more time personal, creating that or fostering that human connection, having that human conversation rather than business. Now, what I will say is you can always transition it over to business a little bit when you talk about problems that they're encountering. And again, allowing them to make it all about themselves, then you end up transitioning it a little to a business problem or a business conversation, but little to do with you and more to do with them, if that makes any
Absolutely.
sense.
Yeah. So does LinkedIn content, does it become more like that dinner meeting or more like a boardroom presentation or somewhere in between?
It has to be somewhere in between. Like,
Mhm.
people want to see the human side of you. So you have to, first off, you have to talk with them and not at them. You have to
What does
make
it
it as
mean?
though you're fostering a conversation.
Give. I've actually had this question asked when I said talking with them instead of at them. They go, what do you mean by that? Like, what exactly does that mean? What does that practically sound like? How do you answer that?
Yeah, so for me, it's really easy. Anytime you are creating content and you say, I want to share with you, you should be doing this. Um, you know, uh, I think you should do this. When you use I and you and me, those are, you're really talking to them. When you say we and us and our, we should in sales be working to humanize conversations. How do we do that? Right. I want to hear that. What you're doing is you're welcoming, you're making them part of the conversation, and then you're welcoming them to participate in that conversation in the comments below.
Is it that easy? No I, me, or us, or I, me, or wait, was it I,
I, me,
me,
and you,
and you? That
or
was the
I,
one.
you,
You.
and me. It doesn't really
Yeah,
matter. Yeah.
no I, no me, no you, but we, us, we and us. That a good fix?
Well, I don't think that's the end all be all. That is a good start to a fix. You do have to make sure that your content actually resonates with people, right?
Right.
And that only happens when you continue to write content. I mean, look, when we all start to generate content, it's going to suck, whether you're doing video or whether you're going to write it out. It's sucks a harsh word, but it's never going to be as good as 2, 3, 6, 12 months down the road, right? You're going to develop your voice as you go. And your voice may start one way and then it may totally shift based on the conversations that you're having or the way your community, audience, network are engaging with you, right? And that's okay. I think those that think that they have to know it all before they start and that are so rigid that they're not willing to adapt and change are the ones that struggle the most. So that was a long answer. The adapting to we, us, and they isn't really, and ours isn't really the end all be all, but it is a great start. And then it's just making sure that you're creating content that's resonating and adjusting accordingly. And the only way that you can determine whether it's resonating is to have conversation with people, right? Engage in the comments. Start that. If I talk about sales and humanizing sales, if I generate a post and no one's engaging there, I'll go somewhere else and have a conversation. And I may just add a little bit about engaging, humanizing sales in that conversation, right? I'll remind them, yeah, that's what I talk about. I find conversations where I can inject a little bit of what I do in there so that it will resonate well and foster conversation. So I think having a good commenting strategy is just as important as establishing content, which is not what you asked, but I thought I'd share that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with that. I think I wanted to move on to the kind of the last topic, and then we can wrap up about how we humanize content, or how we humanize and build trust without being on the content hamster wheel. But you mentioning about commenting and how important it is. I mean, I've asked a lot of people on the other show, if you could only do one, post content or comment on other people's content, which one would you choose?
Well, what did most people say? I'd like to know that answer.
No, you can't get that answer. You got to come up with your answer.
I know what my answer is, but I want to know what the majority of the people.
Your answer.
My answer is, if I had to choose one or the other, I'd rather choose commenting.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Most people that are more engaged now, bigger dogs, what I call big dogs, bigger influencers. Lots of books. Keynote speaker that they side towards that. Well, I want to keep publishing content because they have an established voice and people follow them already and things like that. But I think for the average person, if you had to choose between one or the other, commenting is so much more powerful because you can go comment where you want to be seen. And when you publish content, you really can't control who sees your content.
True. And the other thing too is when you are commenting, you're able to engage in a way that allows you to learn what people want, what they're expecting. It sets the tone as to who you are. And when you're commenting, eventually they'll want to come see your content if you're generating content. And I also say, quick side story. When I first started my own business, it was called Success with AI. And all I wanted to do was evangelize the benefits and the value of leveraging AI while still retaining the human aspect, and not necessarily just in sales. It was always human first. And while that was a great platform, I didn't have a following and I wasn't a thought leader, and no one wants to be educated. So, I mean, I had three dings against me. And what I realized was I needed to shift that a bit and the only way I learned that was through having conversation. And they weren't really generating from my content. It was through the comments, through the engagement I was having in other people's comments. And what I realized was that I could still have that same platform, but leverage it in an area where I had been super successful, where I had expertise in, which was sales, which I was super passionate about. And I could actually bring the two together. But that only happened through the conversations I was having in the comments. So having a content strategy will enable you to not only, have amazing conversation, but allow you to get your voice out there, to shift as necessary, to hear what other people are saying and adapt accordingly. And once they like who you are, they're going to seek out your content.
Yeah. So Denise, let's end on this. Thank you for that, by the way. That was really good. Let's end with what is your advice for CEOs out there, those that are feeling hesitant, those that have been invisible, they feel overwhelmed by this whole content reputation. It's more tasks that need to go on my daily list of things to do. What's your advice for them?
People don't think about you as much as you think they think about you. So what I mean by that is, Brandon is probably not thinking about Denise as much as I think he is. So why worry about what he thinks I may or may not do? Because he's probably not going to see me do it anyway. He's got a million other people he follows. Yes, he may see me make a blip on, make a mistake on a video, or he may read something, but he's not going to think differently about me, right? No one thinks that much about someone that they're going to determine or make base an opinion on one thing that you did. So I think just put yourself out there. Find a way to just start. As Nike says, just do it, right? Get out there, generate some sort of content, and then once you generate that content, know that people aren't going to watch all the negative things. They're not going to care. They're not going to remember, and just have fun with it. And as the more you do it, the more comfortable you get and the better you'll get. And what you see from day one versus day 365 will be very different, and you will be super proud of yourself. 100% guarantee that. So just do it.
That's good. That's good. And for everybody, I get two different ebooks that I think could be valuable for you in this. And one of them is the 5 myths that CEOs believe about social content that's costing them millions. And Hatham, if you want to put that across the little ticker tape there, that one's the 5 myths ebook. I think the one that it's showing right now on the ticker tape is the 1 hour per week CEO content. Yeah, that's the one there. You go to getfistbumps.com/CEO. And that one is a 1 hour per week playbook on how a leader can create weekly content in less than an hour per week. The other one is what I called the 5 myths. I think I got Hatham totally confused now with talking about both ebooks there. But we will add those into the comments, or if I've just completely confused you and one of those sounds interesting, just shoot me a message and I'll get it off to you for sure.
Yeah,
Denise.
because I would like to add, Brandon, if you're okay. I mean, if you're fearful of just doing it, and you can't really you can't fathom this, no one thinks about you as much as you think they do, right? You can't get past that. There are tons of people like Brandon at Fist Bumps. There are so many other people out there who can help you actually get your voice out there, get your content out there, whether it's in text or video format. You've got tons of people just like Brandon at Fist Bumps and various others out there. Email Brandon, reach out to me. We'll point you in the right direction. But there is always someone out there who can help you do it so that you can get past that fear. You just got to do it once.
Thank you for that, Denise. I got to share this story. It's that people aren't thinking about you as much as you believe. And this was years ago. I don't even know how long ago it was. I was just starting. My bald spot was just starting to show, and I was like in my early 40s or something like that. And I had made mention to one of my teammates, and I was talking with him and his wife. I think she came in the office. I was talking with the two of them, and I had just flown in, and I said something like, "Yeah, I'm just kind of aware that when I sit on the chair in the plane like this to sleep, well, if you're coming down the aisle, the only thing you're going to see is this little bald spot." And she looked at me and she goes, "Brandon, nobody's looking at you." And I said, "No, I know, but it's just that da 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 da." And that's the thing. She goes, "No one's looking at you." And it wasn't. And I tried to explain it again. And the third time she said, "No one's looking at you," it finally dawned on me what she was saying. And what she was saying is, you're not that important. Nobody's even paying attention. So don't worry about your little bald spot.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if you're this major thought leader, people still are not going to think about you as much as you think they are.
Yeah,
Ever.
absolutely. Excellent. Hey, Denise, before we wrap up, somebody wants to get in touch with you. They want to talk with you about your services. What's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so find me on LinkedIn. I know I haven't been generating as much content, but I do check my DMs. I do check my comments. So feel free to stop by and engage with me there on LinkedIn. I am slowly ramping up my content again to be back out there. I just had to take a little bit of a break, but I'm always around on LinkedIn in some format or another. So you can find me there.
Excellent. All right. Denise Murtha Buchmann, thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody, thank you for joining us. I'm Brandon Lee, and this is Revenue Through Reputation. And look, I'm passionate about this whole thing around content. I'm still learning a lot. I started doing content with leaders in 1998. Yes, I am that old. But one thing that I've learned over those years is that content is the most efficient way to stay top of mind, to build your reputation, to be remembered, so that when you or other people on your team reach out, nothing is better when they go, "Oh, I feel like I know you guys," or "I see you all the time." And that is the little bit of a difference between a no and a yes. And as we moved into this digital and this social media world, it's become even so much more prominent. I do work with a lot of Gen X and baby boomers. I mean, my clients tend to be from the early 40s up until, I've got a 67-year-old that's doing 69-year-old that's doing content with us. This thing's kind of weird. It's hard. And sometimes you just need a big community of people that's doing it together in order to overcome some of your fears. So if any of that resonates with you and you'd like to have a chat, I'm here for you. Love to have that chat with you, and reach out to me on LinkedIn. So Denise, thank you again. Everyone else, thank you so much. And we'll see you next week on Revenue Through Reputation.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.